started here. Obviously, very exciting win for our program. I talked to the coaches even at the beginning of the week. This was a week in preparation when you know you're going against a very good Nebraska team that, in terms of their staff and the way that they prepare, and they're coming off of a bye week, so you know they're looking at you for 2 weeks, and thought they had a great plan as they came out. Obviously, they did a lot of the things that they have done, some of the foundational things, but built a lot off of it, knowing that they were going to have, you know, a backup quarterback and then a young quarterback coming in as the number 2. Just thought that they did some really good things early on in the game against us. Really was one of those where you're like, hey, you're just going to have to rip and run and get to the ball and find ways to win in the end. And I thought we did that defensively. The thing for us was to be able to create takeaways in the right time, and then to be able to get off the field, obviously at the right time as well, was critical for us defensively. Start the second half to come out with a 3-and-out, our offense responds and goes and scores from those things. All those things are huge positives. Probably the most disappointing thing for us was I just felt like 2 weeks in a row we have not come out and started the way that we need to defensively. And certainly frustrated by that with just the way that we go about our stuff. We're so locked in, we're so focused in our preparation, and then for whatever reason, just with a young group of guys, we've got to translate that to what we do in practice, to how we prepare, how we execute early on in a game, just in our base defense and simple communication things. So those are things that our players will learn from. The mistakes that they have made in the past, they have learned and corrected. So the nice thing is that, you know, you hopefully you grow from the multiple looks that you saw these last 2 weeks, which were probably as multiple as I've seen 2 weeks in a row. So looking forward to moving on from that and continue to get better with our team. And nice to come away with 2 wins, obviously, from that as well. So if you look at Northwestern, this is a team that I've gone against them before when I was the defense coordinator at Eastern Illinois in 2015. Of course, their staff has been there offensively. I think it's the same staff outside of their offensive line coach, who is now the head coach at Eastern Illinois. They've been together for about 13, 14 years. They do a phenomenal job. They know exactly what they're doing. They know what they want to get to. They've got great answers. You watch them against Ohio State. They find ways, even when they're outmatched, to just create something, you know. And obviously they didn't do a ton, you know, in that game. But you see schematically when you look at the way that they give their players a chance to maximize their ability. I think that's probably the most impressive thing when you watch them week in and week out, when typically, you know, they are outmatched sometimes when they're going against Iowas and Ohio States and some of the defenses that they've had to face in Wisconsin and so on and so forth. So I think we do have a strong challenge as a defensive staff and as coaches and players alike to adjust to the things that they do. Obviously, they've had some difficulties somewhat in their passing game. You know, I think both quarterbacks that have played, Aiden Smith and Hunter Johnson, you look at them, they've got some arm talent, been a little bit inconsistent in some of their throws, but they've also made some really nice throws as well. I think our job is we've got to take some of the things that we've done in the past, and we've got to learn from start. You've got to start fast against these guys so that we can go execute, play at a very high level, and don't give them any momentum early on in this football game. Questions?
Because Kane, you kind of mentioned it to start there, but starting out flat defensively the last 2 games, I mean, I'm sure if you had the answer, you would have used it by now, but what is it that you kind of honed in on as the problem, and how do you go about trying to fix it?
Well, you know, so I think there's kind of 2 sides to that. On one end, kind of a unique set of circumstances the last 2 weeks. The first was, you know, Maryland comes off of a Purdue loss where they had just used their quarterback. Their backup quarterback comes in. They do a couple of things on a short week that's a little bit different with number 3 with Pigrom. And then all of a sudden going into our week, they realized, hey, some of those things didn't work. So they kind of shifted to a totally different schematic offensively. You look at Nebraska, obviously they had struggled, you know, in the previous 2 weeks before their bye week. They've got 2 weeks to prepare. They know that Martinez is not going to play, so they get everything ready for more of a running style. So part of it is some of the things that you prepare for the last 2 weeks just teams have had to adjust, and so they've done some different things. With a young defense, that has been our biggest challenge is I can't rep it all, we can't show you everything, and they're going to obviously adjust and do some different things. So learning to adjust quicker on the fly. On a positive, they have adjusted as the game has gone on. I thought Nebraska did a nice job of every series. They gave us a new wrinkle that we kept having to adjust throughout the game, but when our players saw it again and they came back to it in those later rounds, right, we ended up figuring it out, and that was really the difference in the game. The takeaways, the fourth down stop, the times that we did get off the field on third down, it was things that we saw, we recognized, and adjusted to. We just need to have recall as they gain more experience in their careers so that they go, okay, I saw this 3 weeks ago, you know.
Zach and Tom.
Kind of the converse to that 17 second half points the last 2 weeks. Obviously a few more yards than Maryland, but still kind of the same idea that from a points perspective,
Yeah.
things really changed after halftime. What do you feel like you and your staff are getting accomplished at halftime, and how much better do you think maybe your players are at absorbing the necessary adjustments to be better in the second half?
I do think that the communication on the sideline, the way that we are talking from up in the box to what's happening on the sideline, the charting, the things that we're doing, and then we're making certain adjustments in the first quarter, in the second quarter, but then at halftime when we're able to kind of put it all together with our guys settling back in, I think our coaching staff has really done a phenomenal job in the last 2 weeks in terms of the way that we've had to adjust to the multiplicity of offense that we have seen. That being said, I think a lot of it on top of that is our players are just learning to play in big environments with pressure on them. You know what I mean? They all know what this win meant for us, and obviously you want to get to 6 so that you can get to 7 and all those types of things, but you go in front of 90,000, that's really the first time we've had to react in that type of environment. Obviously Michigan State had a great environment, but there's something different about Nebraska when you walk out in that stadium, and their crowd, you know, just credit to them in terms of the loud and all those things, that they did a nice job. I think our guys just have to do a better job of adjusting, you know, early in the game. You know.
Tom and Kevin.
Can you talk a little bit further about that adjustment of what the guys are doing on the field? I mean, obviously you can prepare them a certain way and adjust on the sidelines a certain way, but a lot of that is just making their decisions on the field mid-play. Can you talk a little bit about how that's improved?
Yeah, I think, you know, as we saw the last 2 weeks where, you know, there are some different things that offenses are doing, right? So you have to adjust to that, right, schematically. But for our guys, when you just lock in and focus on your keys, and I'm telling you, it's the hardest thing that you have to teach a young defense is, can you lock in 11 bodies and do it over and over and over again, one play at a time? And the early points that we have given up in the last 2 weeks, right, most of it has just come off of a lack of discipline and where their eyes need to be. Certainly certain things that they have not seen before plays into that, right? But in terms of communication and discipline and focusing your eyes in the right place, we just have to continue to get better and better and better at those things. And I think we're doing that as the game's going on. What I want to see is, can we go out in the first 2 or 3 series of a game and put them away? The very first play of the game, we call a double edge blitz from the field. We bring 2 off the edge, the Husky and the Mike. If we make a check into the boundary off of a motion, we've got them all covered up. A split second later, and we're getting a sack off of the Micah McFadden, comes right through, blitz goes perfectly. We just need, half a count more, and we get a sack. What does that game look like when we get them to 2nd and 15? Now they can't go tempo, right? They're behind the chains. They've got to come off of their script that they've been working on for the last 2 weeks, because now they're behind the chains. And then all of a sudden the momentum completely changes. Our offense goes and scores. Those are the things, those momentum plays that we need to have early in the game that you saw when we took care of business against Rutgers early on, right? We stayed on them the entire game, and that's what we got to do a better job of moving forward.
Kevin and Jeff.
Yeah, how has Micah's development impacted the defense, and how has he grown kind of as a player and a leader during the course of the season?
Micah McFadden, yeah. So Micah McFadden is just a very special player. It's been fun to watch his development go from, like I said, a guy that, made plays when I'm not sure he knew what the call was a year ago, to now, he understands how to run the defense. He knows he's starting to anticipate things better. Continue to got to work on some of his footwork and technique. He makes so many plays, but there's other plays that he leaves out there on the field because I think he doesn't realize how fast he is sometimes. You know what I mean? It's almost that Fred Flintstone where his feet go up underneath him. He's just got to settle in, right? Know that you're one of the fastest dudes on the field. You got plenty of time to go make a play. Let's settle our feet and then drive to the football. But sky's the limit for Micah McFadden. He has become a better and better football player every single week. And his production and the way he plays is just off the charts.
Jeff and Taylor.
You guys, Coach, you guys had to prepare for either multiple quarterbacks or the potential of it's either A or B. How does that impact the prep? Because it's kind of a similar situation this week.
It impacts my sleep a lot more than anything else. You know, you just have to prepare for a lot more. The last 2 weeks, no bones about it. It takes longer to prepare because you got to have game plan 1, game plan 1B, game plan 1C when they come out and they've had 2 weeks to prepare for you, and all of a sudden they come out in a lot of different looks. And so I don't want to give up plays early in the first half. You know what I mean? That's as frustrating as anything as a defensive coordinator really is. But I cannot undervalue the adjustments that our coaching staff has made in the last 2 weeks, and ultimately it's helped us win football games.
Taylor and Don with the last question.
Coach, there's been a lot of talk about the last 2 recruiting classes you guys have had. A lot of those guys have kind of stepped up, especially on the defensive side. And in some ways, it can be a vulnerability, and in other ways, it's a strength. But coming into the year, is that something where you kind of sat down a lot of young guys and you said, okay, we expect you to kind of play into a position, or is it something where guys are just naturally okay with playing their way into defense?
I think we always anticipated that we were going to be a fairly young defense, that we were going to play a lot of young, talented players. For us, I think some of those guys, they've done some phenomenal things, and they've all done great things at different times. We have seen the inconsistency of a young defense. When you put a bunch of guys out there that are true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomores, even redshirt sophomores that just haven't played very much, you're going to have some growing pains from that. I think the positive that you're talking about is, well, what does 2020 and 21 look like? Well, pretty good, right? Because all those guys are back. They've learned things. They've gained experience. Obviously, it makes a coordinator's job easier when you don't feel like you have to put them in the right call every single play because they're just going to fix it, right? Because they've seen it, they've had the experience, they recognize it. Right now, we don't have much of that goes on in the field. And so we got to make sure we're putting them in the right situations as much as we can, as often as we can, until they start to gain that base knowledge of defensive understanding.
Last one for Don.
Kane, can you talk a little bit about the defensive line and your evaluation of them? Because going into the season, they were a little bit of a question mark. Where are they at now? Are they anywhere close to the level you think they should be playing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think they have. I think probably the biggest positive from us was what we felt like we may be a little bit deficient in the interior defensive line, certainly in terms of numbers. Now you got Jerome Johnson, who has been a solid force for us inside. I think that there are times where Jerome can make some more plays and he can have more production out there on the field. Sometimes they come, sometimes they don't. But I think you look at the steadiness that he has done on the inside, along with just, DeMarcus Elliott and Co, what those two guys have been able to do in just a short amount of time of learning our defense. Neither one of those guys were here in the springtime. They didn't get any of those reps. The adjustment that they've had, that's probably been one of the biggest upsides to our defense in terms of personnel. Probably the biggest upside going into where we thought we were in fall camp.
Thanks, Coach.
All right. Thank you very much.